Rudy Giuliani is a man of 1,000 faces. He was a stoic leader during the September 11th attacks and a fierce general in his war against organised crime. But he's also a boomer dad who can't wear AirPods correctly. The less said about him sweating hair dye or only adding veneers to his top set of teeth, the better.
And during that time, he got sweaty and his hair color started running.
Mayor, what's the situation right now?
The situation is that two airplanes have attacked, apparently. Can't go to sleep. Why? They should not go to sleep.
Rudy's life and career can be best characterised as changing. For every streak of good publicity that landed at his feet, the pendulum soon swung the other way, and vice versa. This begs the question of whether his shapeshifting is proof of his duplicitousness, or his ability to survive for 50 years in the cutthroat world of politics. So it's time to learn how history works as we tally up the many sides of Rudy Giuliani, villain, hero, repeat.
My father would say to me, when you make a decision, the most important thing you've got to think about is, can you shave the next morning and look at yourself in the mirror and feel good about yourself?
It isn't truth. Truth isn't truth. Shut up.
Wait, damn it, let me finish. I got to cut the call, and the president's remark.
What's your mission?
Born in 1944 to a working-class Italian-American family in Brooklyn, his grandparents had emigrated from Tuscany and brought with them their Roman Catholicism, which would become the backdrop to Rudy's school life. He attended Catholic schools up until graduating in 1961 and considered entering the priesthood. Usually, students asked their parents for cars or vacations for completing high school, but Rudy requested a big desk and a big leather chair. That's because he'd become engrossed in politics. He signed yearbooks with the phrase, "Vote Democratic," and even persuaded a few classmates to skip school with him so they could glimpse his then hero, John F. Kennedy. But his interest in politics would be momentarily replaced with a passion for law. Upon finishing at the Manhattan College in the Bronx, the 21-year-old Rudy signed up at New York University's law school. By now, US involvement in Vietnam was picking up, and the swinging 60s were coming to a close. Yet during that time, Rudy dodged the draft with deferments. Luckily for him, by the time these ran out, his conscription number was too high to be summoned to fight. Rudy Giuliani later claimed he was opposed to the conflict on, quote, strategic and tactical grounds, although he couldn't give any examples when pressed. But the fact he volunteered for Bobby Kennedy and admitted for voting for McGovern in '72 suggests some ideological opposition. After all, his path through law would lead back to politics soon enough in what became the first of his many flip-flops. Rudy had been working as a clerk in the Southern District of New York since graduating from law school. That was until he was hired by the Ford administration to serve as the Associated Deputy Attorney General. This caused him to switch his party registration from Democrat to Independent, most likely as a way to at least appear as if there were no political conflicts. His first high-profile prosecution was of Democratic US Representative Bertram L. Podell, who pleaded guilty to charges of conspiracy when he accepted $41,000 from a Florida airline to obtain federal rights for a Bahama route. Not a bad first gig for Rudy. He carried on working throughout the Carter administration, but perhaps a little bit too much. His former boss, Ace Tyler, and yes, that's a real name, said some of Rudy's prosecutions were overkill. It was like he wanted to get noticed. Then in 1980, Reagan came into power, so Rudy switched his party again, this time from Independent to Republican. However, his own mother said he wasn't really a Republican. She went on record to say that he only changed parties when jobs started rolling in, the implication being that he changed facade to appeal to his growing customer base. It clearly worked because by 1981, Rudy was given the third highest position in the Department of Justice, Associate Attorney General. But just 2 years later, he would be demoted to US Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Yet this step down was precisely what Rudy wanted, because now, at age 39, he was the boss of the same firm he had joined as a clerk all those years ago. Here is where Rudy developed a reputation for being tough on crime. He declared war on insider trading, corruption, and the mafia. By the end, Rudy had tallied 4,125 convictions, with only 25 reversals. Some of the people he locked up were 11 figures associated with the 5 crime families of New York.
I got a contract was put out on me the first year that I was the mayor by the Sicilian Mafia.
Years later, an informant revealed that the families had almost voted to assassinate Giuliani, but they couldn't reach a unanimous vote. Lucky for Rudy, not even his enemies could reach a consensus about him. But his war on crime also had problems. During this time, Rudy created the perp walk, the act of parading suspects in front of previously alerted media outlets. The likes of CSI Miami are thankful for the iconography, but many critics deemed this as undemocratic because it influences public perception before the outcome of a trial. Critics also said that sometimes Rudy did this just to look good, knowing full well that charges would be dropped later. One example was Richard Wigton, who Rudy said was guilty of insider trading. News footage showed Wigton in tears, yet just 3 months later, the charges were dropped altogether. All in all, the decline in crime was seen as a good thing, so Rudy felt his efforts to improve New York would help him at the ballot box. He resigned from office when the Reagan administration ended, but his climb to mayor of New York would not be as easy as he had hoped. Rudy's first run was in 1989, on both liberal and conservative lines. How much of a flip-flopper do you need to be when you try to hedge your bets with a party base? Well, he should have hedged more bets because he lost to David Dinkins with the closest margin in New York history. 1 year later, Rudy spoke at the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association rally. The union's protest against Dinkins' leadership devolved into a riot, with some 4,000 off-duty cops storming City Hall. This would stain Giuliani, but not completely. Registration cards were handed out to the crowd, which helped Rudy in 4 years' time when he ran again. He won the rematch with Dinkins, making it the first time a Republican had been elected mayor of the Big Apple since 1965. There was a perception that crime was uncontrolled during Dinkins' tenure, so Giuliani capitalized on it and made lowering crime his signature campaign move. He promised to focus on shutting down petty crimes, aka the broken window theory. But there were concerns that this approach would juke the stats. Rudy's first time as mayor did see a staggering 58% drop in crime. However, it had been noticed that crime was actually declining under Dinkins, despite perceptions. But whether this was because of his predecessor's office, or even because of Rudy's war on organised crime and corruption years earlier, remains a fierce point of debate. In any case, the stop and frisk tactic saw a short-term decline in drug dealing and petty crimes, but the rates of racial profiling and police brutality went up. New York residents remember the case of Abner Luema, who was beaten by police and then sodomized with a broom handle. He did successfully sue the city, and the offending police officers were imprisoned. But it is another stain on Rudy's legacy.
I hope what comes out of my case is change. What happened to me should not happen to any human being, to my children, or anybody else's children.
As is the killing of Amadou Diallo, who was shot 19 times by plainclothes police officers when he reached for his wallet.
That moment, it was a shock. The 41 shots echoed around the world. It was a defining moment in history where all creed, all race, everyone came together, marching and demanding how come a human being be shot at 41 times.
Rudy's comments that the police officers should be given the benefit of the doubt wasn't exactly the smartest thing he could have said. Yet it didn't seem to stop him from getting re-elected in 1997. There were positives though. His cumulative time as mayor saw expansions in healthcare amongst low-income families, cuts to taxes and spending to rebalance the $2.3 billion deficit that was inherited from Dinkins, and there were urban reconstructions. For a brief moment, he tried to bounce to a soon-to-be vacant Senate seat in 2000 when his term time was drawing to a close. However, a cancer diagnosis forced him to pull out of the race.
Mr. Giuliani, I'd love to start with you. I know that you suffered from prostate cancer. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. It was 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago, that I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I went through treatment, seeds and external radiation, and I've been free of prostate cancer.
With 1 year left, and candidates ineligible to run for a third term as mayor of New York, Rudy was slowly stepping out of the spotlight. That was until he was thrust back into it on September 11th, 2001.
New York is going to be here, and we're going to rebuild, and we're going to be stronger than we were before.
Rudy's visibility in the aftermath of the attacks earned him the moniker of America's Mayor.
He's the mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani.
A nickname originally coined by Oprah Winfrey. His close involvement with the rescue and recovery efforts saw his approval ratings spike, especially when he attended funerals of the victims. By December, he'd been named Person of the Year by Time magazine. Before the attacks, his public image was one of rigidness and self-righteousness, but now he was seen as a man who could unite and rebuild, a man who had left the city more prosperous than the one he inherited. Even Queen Elizabeth II granted him an honorary knighthood. However, in time, his role would be re-examined. Initially, his opening of Wall Street on September 17th was a way to get the city back on its feet, but concerns of air quality soured that move. It also didn't help that it was his idea to move the Office of Emergency Management headquarters to World Trade Center 7, despite long-standing concerns that it was a prime terrorist target ever since the 1993 bombing. By the time the 9/11 Commission concluded, there were concerns about Rudy's mismanagement of emergency services and how it hindered the response to the attacks. But did it matter? His image was so great that Mexico City hired him in 2002 to help reduce crime in their city. He would dip his toe in political waters once again in 2008 with a short-lived and ill-fated presidential bid, but he quickly learned the limits of his own candidacy. Instead, he threw his political weight behind candidates he wanted to see win, and against those he wanted to see lose. Strangely, he seemed to imply that Obama had, in effect, caused 9/11, despite the Democratic leader's administration not occurring during the turn of the millennium. Rudy did always like a fight. It might surprise you, but Rudy was quite the ladies' man. His first marriage was to his father's first cousin's daughter, Regina, although Rudy denied knowing any family connection when he annulled his marriage after 14 years. Surely someone at the wedding pointed out the couple were second cousins? His second marriage to Donna Hanover lasted until 2002, which came as news to her. She didn't know they were getting separated until he announced it at a press conference. Later on, she accused him of having an affair with a staffer. He denied it, of course. He was having an affair with another woman.
I would like to introduce my wife, Mrs. Giuliani.
That woman, Judith Nathan, became his third ex-wife following allegations of infidelity. Their divorce was so public and bitter that they were arguing over Christmas decorations. When word got out that he was hoarding the festive lights, Rudy released a statement saying that as it was August at the time, she was in no rush to get the lights back. But the strangest fight Rudy had was with ferrets. Really.
You just heard a clip from then-Mayor Rudy Giuliani's WABC radio show from 1999. The city of New York had made it its business to forbid city residents from keeping ferrets as house pets.
Pet ownership over the cute critters has been a bit of a legal ping-pong match, with bills being set up and knocked down over and over. Rudy himself came down on the side of health agencies over fears for agriculture and disease. However, part of the moral panic was based on a case of a child being bitten by a rat. But no one had time to go into the details because the sensational episode spiraled out of control. In fact, the director of a pro-ferret rights advocacy group, and yes, that's a thing, called into Rudy's radio show to ambush him. Rudy responded to the surprise conversation in a now legendary rant where he said of the caller that this excessive concern with little weasels is a sickness. Some of Rudy's enemies were much bigger than four-legged mammals and ex-wives, like the time Rudy went to task against Panama dictator Manuel Noriega. A fictional version of Noriega had been used in an installment of the Call of Duty franchise, so he tried to sue the video game publishers for infringing on his copyright, or something like that.
Former Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega has brought Activision a lawsuit over 2012's Call of Duty Black Ops 2.
Thankfully, Rudy flew to the rescue and dismissed the case in October 2014. Not just because it would have meant millions of dollars going towards the dictatorship, but because it would have violated the right of artists to use historical figures in works of fiction. He might be regretting that now because his ties with Trump have tanked his reputation. Rudy had shown almost fanatical support for Donald Trump's presidential bid and administration, so it was logical that he'd be pulled closer into the inner circle. When allegations of Russian collusion were investigated, the ex-reality TV show star made Rudy his personal lawyer. But while this was happening, Rudy was also trying to dig up dirt on Joe Biden's son over possible ties with a Ukrainian power company. Was this meddling an attempt to divert from problems in his camp? In the end, these matters would be resolved in their respective court proceedings, yet everything would be overshadowed by Trump's re-election defeat. 4 days after Trump lost, Rudy was picked to give a press conference presenting Trump's legal challenge to the ballot counting process. But somehow, the team failed to book a spot at the Four Seasons Hotel. Instead, they booked a garage parking spot outside the Four Seasons Landscaping Company. This was situated near an adult toy shop and a crematorium, which is just the cherry on the cake for the end of Rudy Giuliani's career. Since then, Rudy has appeared in the sequel to the Borat movie, where Sacha Baron Cohen alleged that the former mayor of New York was trying to expose his genitals to a young woman. Rudy says he was just tucking in his shirt.
It is what it is. He did what he did. And make your own mind up. It was pretty clear to us.
So, who's telling the truth? Borat or Rudy? Let us know in the comments below. If you've got an opinion on Rudy Giuliani's approach to crime, 9/11, or ferrets, then we want to hear it. If you liked this video, then check out our video on Saddam Hussein for another story on a lawyer turned villain. Don't forget to share this with someone from New York, and be sure to like this video if you want us to make more biographies on scandalous politicians. One last thing, subscribe. We'll be back soon with a new video all about how history works.